Now to take you further into the discussion of the Islamic State, we're joined by Max Abrahms in Boston. He's a political science professor at Northeastern University. Thanks so much for talking to us. Hey, why don't we start with Richard Bestick's report? There seems to be so much anger in England, but was there much that the security forces could have done in this case, do you think?
You know, it actually reminds me a little bit of the Kouachi situation, who was one of the brothers who was involved in the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris not too long ago, because he was also on the French radar and he seemed troubled, and he even traveled to a conflict zone. In this case, he went to Yemen, and there's some questions whether he linked up with AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And then he came back to France, and he seems to be, you know, unmonitored after that, even though authorities were supposedly, you know, afraid of him and watching him. And so we see a similar thing with this Jihadi John character. You know, he traveled to Tanzania. The presumption by MI5 is that he went there in order to possibly get into Somalia, in order to link up with al-Shabaab, and then he was sent to Amsterdam and back to the UK, and then after a few other steps, which we don't need to go into, he basically disappeared, and it was reported that he traveled through Istanbul and then got into Syria, and so it's a parallel case, it would seem.
Let me ask you about this narrative. The people who are going over to fight, either seen as disaffected, people with mental issues, or just losers. And Wazi, a completely different case altogether. I mean, well-educated, came from a good family, all of that. Does this change how we view the people joining ISIL, or is this an aberration, do you think?
It's not at all an aberration. Political scientists like myself, we've studied to death the relationship between poverty and terrorism, as well as between education levels and terrorism. In the past couple of weeks, the State Department has said that we need to address the root causes of terrorism. Specifically, we need to pull people out of poverty to make them less inclined to become terrorists, and we need to provide, you know, more educational opportunities. But in fact, political scientists know that poverty does not predict terrorism. Poor education levels also do not predict terrorism. In fact, terrorists disproportionately hail from the upper and middle class and tend to be relatively educated. So in no way is this case anomalous.
Okay, well, to your point, there's a report coming out of Canada. 4 young men and 2 women left that country. They're believed to have also gone to fight with ISIL. At least 4 of them were college students recently in Montreal. So let me ask you this, since you've studied this, why would college students who seem well-educated be interested in going and joining this organization or group, these terrorists that most other people would look at and say, why would anyone want to be attached to them?
You know, there's a natural tendency to look at these terrorists as victims, the grievance model of terrorism. You know, surely something horrible has happened to these people to drive them into the arms of Islamic State. But there's really another lens which I believe has more explanatory power, and that is that they're not victims, they're predators. They go on these trips to Islamic State for a bevy of reasons. There's no single causal path to radicalization, but people are joining up with Islamic State for all sorts of reasons, to rape Yazidi women, to join a powerful group, to perhaps gain respect among a small niche of people. To travel with their friends, to find adventure and meaning in their lives. And so I think that we should move away from the grievance model, because it's not that predictive, and instead see these people as the predators that they are.
Well, that's a really interesting point, and thank you for your analysis, Max. Appreciate you joining us from Boston.